What's a let that sink in fun fact? It took humanity approximately 4 times longer to switch from copper swords to steel swords than it took to switch from steel swords to nuclear bombs. Gwen Stefani is older than Ted Cruz. Didn't believe this? Googled. It's true that Sid is bananas. When NASA pitched the idea of the Voyager missions to Richard Nixon with the idea of touring the outer planets, he was told that the last time it was possible, Thomas Jefferson was in the White House. The particular planetary alignment that Voyager 2 used on its journey occurs only once every 176 years. Jefferson really dropped the ball. Your bones are wet. I now feel weird. Now all I can think about is my bones slipping and sliding around under my muscles. I don't like it. If the sun were scaled down to the size of a white blood cell, the Milky Way galaxy would be the size of the continental United States. The vastness of space is mind-boggling. Next to the U.S. Army, Disney World is the largest buyer and importer of explosives in the USA. I was wondering what Mickey needed nukes for before I remembered fireworks exist. We are closer to the year 2040 than the year of 1994. No. The Titanic had 2 sister ships, the Britannic and the Olympic. There was a woman called Violet Jessop, a nurse and a cruise liner stewardess that worked on all 3. The Olympic crashed into a warship whilst leaving harbor but was able to make it back. She was on the Titanic as it sank and is referenced in the Titanic film, a stewardess that was told to set an example to the non-English speaking passengers as the ship sank. She looked after a baby on lifeboat 16 until being rescued by the Carpathia the next day. It's not known what exactly caused the sinking of the Britannic, but the lifeboats hit the water too early. As the ship sank, the rear listed up and a number of the lifeboats were sucked into the propellers. Violet had to jump out of the lifeboat she was in and sustained a serious head injury, but survived. She was on board for all 3 incidents in the space of 5 years. She went back to continue to work at sea for another 30 years before retiring in 1950. She died of heart failure in 71. If you live in the USA, you have better odds of dating Taylor Swift than dying of bird flu and Ebola combined. Don't try to scare us. In the span of the last 3 Star Wars movies, the Cleveland Browns have won 1 game. There was a time in history when trees existed but the fungi which causes wood to rot had not yet evolved to digest wood. Dead trees and plants would pile up and the 35% oxygen atmosphere caused massive fires. This is also the time where petrified wood came from. Trees would sit in mud for 1,000 of years and not rot while minerals slowly replaced the wood structures. Fires in 35% oxygen, and wood everywhere. I'd be facing petrified too. The man who invented the frisbee was cremated and turned into a frisbee. Okay, but how? My son was cremated and there's no way I could turn his ashes into a frisbee. Would probably have been mixed with the melted plastic. And Frank and Martin Luther King Jr. were born in the same year. Queen Elizabeth and Marilyn Monroe were born a month apart. I find it hard to believe Marilyn Monroe was born in 1533. Scientists who work with cockroaches often develop allergies towards cockroaches. At the same time, they also develop allergies to pre-ground coffee. Stegosaurus lived 150 million years ago. T-Rex lived 65 million years ago. Stegosaurus was more ancient to the T-Rex than the T-Rex is to us. In the USA, more soldiers die from suicide than in combat. The Great Pyramid was built before the last woolly mammoth died. Vending machines have killed more people than sharks. Why would vending machines go around killing sharks? Pineapples take 2 years to grow. You can place all the planets of our solar system between Earth and Moon and even have a bit of spare space after. The U.S. federal government classifies cocaine as a less serious, more useful drug than marijuana. When humans started farming, blue eyes in humans hadn't evolved yet. The cigarette lighter was actually invented before the match. Dozens of Americans die every day from slipping in the shower and hitting their heads. Dozens, I tell you. It's one of the primary leading causes of non-medical deaths in the USA. There is, on average, a supernova explosion every 50 years in the Milky Way. On average, there are 30 every second in the observable universe. After hitting the iceberg, it took 2 hours and 40 minutes for the Titanic to fully submerge underwater. Let that sink in. There are more chickens in America than people on the planet. The U.S. Navy has the 2nd largest air force in the world. The U.S. Army has the 3rd. What do you call a war between the 3 largest air forces in the world? A civil war. The UK Dyslexia Association is situated in Reading. In 2008, the subreddit rjailbait was voted subreddit of the year in the best of Reddit poll. Reddit sure has come a long way. Neutron stars have such strong gravity that if you drop the marshmallow into one, it would be like dropping a 3-megaton nuclear warhead on Earth. Gary Newman is older than Gary Oldman by a little under 2 weeks. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush and Donald Trump were all born within a 66-day stretch. China used more concrete in 3 years than the US used in the entire 20th century. Macaulay Culkin is now older than Catherine O'Hara was when she played his mom in Home Alone. If you have clean water and temperature control, you are better off than half the population. The first electric car was invented at the end of the 19th century and it went 65 mph. Sharks are older than trees. Edit. Okay, sharks predate trees. The oldest shark fossils we know of are 420 to 450 million years old. The oldest known tree is Wadiza, about 385 million years old. Adwaita, the longest living animal ever, was a giant tortoise given to Clive of India. He was born around 1750 and died in 2006. He existed longer than the United States has. There are more tigers privately owned in Texas than tigers in the wild. Your computer is much more likely of contracting a virus by surfing legitimate church sites than by surfing porn sites. Porn sites generally have experts combating viral stuff, while church sites are maintained by lower-tech volunteers. As a rule, the overall goal in golf is to play less golf. The Holy Roman Empire existed until 30 years after the United States was founded, 1776 to 1806. The Oxford University is actually older than the Aztecs. Interesting. The University of Oxford, informally Oxford University or simply Oxford, is a collegiate research university located in Oxford, England. It has no known date or foundation, but there is evidence of teaching as far back as 1096, making it the oldest university in the English-speaking world and the world's second oldest university in continuous operation. It grew rapidly from 1167 when Henry II banned English students from attending the University of Paris. After disputes between students and Oxford townsfolk in 1209, some academics fled northeast to Cambridge where they established what became the University of Cambridge. The two ancient universities are frequently jointly referred to as Oxbridge. The Aztec Empire, or the Triple Alliance, began as an alliance of three Nahuatl city-states, Mexico, Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan. These three city-states ruled the area in and around the Valley of Mexico from 1428 until the combined forces of the Spanish conquistadors and their native allies under Hernan Cortes defeated them in 1521. The moon orbits us from the west to the east, but we see it move across the sky east to west because of the rate of the Earth's rotation. Our observation is like being in a faster car watching a slower car, heading in the same absolute direction, fall further and further behind us. France was still using the guillotine when the first Star Wars film came out. Over the space of 3 days, an estimated 165 people survived both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear bomb attacks. Tsutomu Yamaguchi is one of the more famous ones, who was only 2 miles from ground zero when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. It hit when he was walking to work on the last day of a work trip. After he heard the drone of a plane, he looked up at it and the sky lit up. He was then plucked from the ground, spun around and tossed into a nearby potato field. Miraculously he survived, despite being covered in burns, soaked in radiation, and with 2 blown eardrums. He spent a night in an air shelter, then took an overnight sleeper train home to Nagasaki to see his family. When he made it to a hospital in Nagasaki, he was so burnt a childhood friend didn't recognize him. Neither did his family. Despite his wounds, he made it to work the next day. He started giving his boss a rundown on what happened, and his boss thought he was crazy. There was no way one bomb could destroy a city. Suddenly, a bright light lit up the room. He panicked and dropped to the floor of the office seconds before the shock wave smashed out the office windows. He had just been hit twice by a nuclear blast in the space of 3 days. At the age of 93 he was given the title Niju Hibakusha, or twice-bombed person. He died the next year. So next time you think you're having a city week at work, yeah, this article is a good one on him. To be in the top 1% of Americans in terms of income, you need to rake in about $400,000 a year, rounded off to $1,000 a day. The U.S. dropped 26,172 bombs last year, 2016. That's almost 72 per day. That's about 3 bombs an hour every hour for the entire year. In 2017, the U.S. had already dropped more bombs than that by September.